Hey, it's State of State. We got your Nittany Line update. It's a football discussion with Tom and Justin, so kick back and press play.
With former Penn State and NFL defensive back Justin King, I'm Tom Hannafin. This is State of State. This podcast is presented by BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything online sports betting. Right now, you can receive a 50% free bet of up to $250 on your first deposit to bet on anything from the Olympics to baseball to Formula One racing. BetOnline is every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game's over, head to the online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with one of over 150 slots games. Head to betonline.ag today to get in on the action. Use the promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for your 50% free bet credit on your first deposit up to $250. State of State is presented by BetOnline. The game starts here. State of State is proud to partner with Illumination Brewing for another season of crafting State IPA, the perfect tailgate and game day beer for Penn State football fans. State IPA is available starting Monday, August 19th at your local beer distributor, grocery store, plus select bars and restaurants. Visit illuminationbrewing.com/beer/state-IPA to learn more. Must be 21 years or older to purchase. Please drink responsibly. State of State is a proud supporter of Blue White Outfitters. Blue White Outfitters was created as a retail shop meant to highlight the confidence, competitiveness, and fearlessness of the elite athletes found throughout the history of Penn State University. Check out their Lockdown U and Lawn Boys merchandise today. All sales from Blue White Outfitters directly benefit Penn State student athletes. Visit www.bluewhiteoutfitters.com today. Today is all about Penn State's offense and previewing things for training camp. Things got underway this week in Happy Valley. What does Penn State have on offense that needs to be focused on by the Penn State fan base? What position battles are going to be critical here in August? And what does Penn State need to put together before they hit the road for Morgantown, West Virginia on Saturday, August 31st to begin the season? I cannot wait to have freaking football back. Like, comment, subscribe, rate us, turn on notifications, and comment as always on social media at State of State Pod and on YouTube. We appreciate it so much. God, I'm ready for football to be with us. I've been dialed into EA college football like a psychopath lately, Justin, and this is a very intriguing year for Penn State's offense. We talked about the defense this week as well here on the podcast. Offensively, Andy Kotelnicki feels like such a great unknown for us all together, and that you and I talked about it this week is that, okay, Tom Allen feels like the consistent thread from the Brent Pry era to the Manny Diaz era, just feels like a very similar style of coach, style of defense altogether. Kotelnicki feels like we're going to get something different, and I think Penn State fans are hoping to God to see something different. I think that's been the expectation for a while, but the promise of what Mike Yurcich could have been versus what Andy Kotelnicki has been heralded as capable of doing, being more dynamic in terms of getting more explosive plays out there, emphasizing the running game, maybe opening up the passing game, getting Drew Allar to unlock his game a little bit more. There's so much unknown here. We do just kind of have to see how this all plays out in Morgantown and then as September rolls out. But at this point with training camp, what do you need to start hearing and feeling from this offense at this point in the year?
Explosive plays, consistent explosive plays, chunk plays, where it's like, oh, get 12 at a clip whenever we need it, whether it's a pass and play, a screen, play selection. And it's interesting. I like to get away from the stats when I look at offensive coordinators, because I think, depending on what teams you play in college football, there's not much parity, right? You can do some things. But I think one common thread when you get a chance to talk to offensive coordinators, like the process of calling plays or putting your guys in position to do whatever, like you're coming from a pretty systematic approach, right? So when you have guys that are like more analytical and just like, okay, I'm going like this, the play calling sometimes gets stale or tight, right? So when you get around offensive coordinators that are charismatic or like have more of like a defensive type of mentality where it's just like loose and letting things go, like a Shanahan or like McDaniels down in Miami. When you get those type of offensive guys, it gets pretty interesting. And I met Andy briefly when I went up there for camp, and the charisma jumped off a little bit. It wasn't, like a wet blanket or anything, or just like, hey, I'm just sterile. It was like a personable guy. That's not, you don't get that a lot with offensive coordinators. Like they're really like, when you have like a feel and just like from a personality standpoint. So I don't know anything else about that. I'm not in the building, so
Mhm.
don't let anybody run with it. I liked just the interaction that I did have with them, coupled with him having a creative background. He had a little bit more, like I say, he's like he has some shit to him.
I like
I
that.
like that.
I think that's necessary because your sitch felt very much like a little bit quieter.
Kind of what I was kind of what I was describing.
Yeah, and nothing against him, just like
No, there's things against that coordinator, but it's okay. It's okay.
I'm more saying it's just two different personalities. Like either have worked. It's just a matter of does it work here? Does it work with this roster?
Right. And it's like, how long does it work? And is it working to the level of, like you said, like the
It's the level of
expected
expectation.
expected outcome, right? If I'm bringing you here to win a national championship, or for us to go somewhere that we haven't been, let's change it up.
hmm
But yeah.
Will Drew Allar be able to open up as a passer? Obviously, he's very effective at protecting the football, and you want to see more explosive plays. You want to see him show off his arm a little bit. Wide receiver is going to be a huge focal point as we get into the early part of the season. I don't know if you're really going to see all that much change in training camp in terms of that anticipated top five, that top three at the position. I think we understand the top three is going to be Trey Wallace, Julian Fleming, and Liam Clifford in no particular order. I think everybody wants to see if Julian Fleming this time of year starts to open up in training camp. Do we start hearing about the buzz, the promise of what Fleming can be or what could have been at Ohio State? Does he realize some of that potential? Or is it Trey Wallace taking the leap that we think he's capable of? And then also the opportunity is there for a lot of young wide receivers, a la Caden Saunders, Amari Evans. You and I have talked about Tyseer Denmark and Peter Gonzalez as young freshmen that could potentially jump in there. A lot of other guys competing at that position. So wide receiver is a big question mark, and it's just like we got to see how this goes through camp. I don't necessarily know if you're going to see, again, a shuffling of the depth chart. I think the biggest position to pay attention to for every Penn State fan is offensive line. It's not the sexiest thing in the world, but it's going to be important in that both tackle positions, the starter is a question mark. And also the starter is not even necessarily considered the starter. Sometimes when you hear James Franklin talk about, well, if this guy gets X amount of reps, we kind of consider him a starter. Basically, they could platoon both tackle positions, but there is some confidence and a lot more experience at the guard position. Center is being replaced. And even though Nick Dawkins is a longtime player for Penn State, still getting the opportunity to potentially be the number one center for this team. The young Cooper Cousins potentially jumping in as the guard spot. Center can maybe bump out to tackle. I'd be shocked about that as well. But when you have that much of a question at both your tackle spots, that's worrisome. I think that's what Penn State fans should be paying attention to, because if you want to open up this running game and you want to pass protect, it starts there. It's a little worrisome.
I mean, the way you broke it down, that is a little worrisome. But you always got to take care of the quarterback, right? At the end of the day, when it comes down to those different type of things. And I think that offensive line room, again, I lean to the coaches, because at the college level, you got to get guys ready to go. And I think that they've done a great job, man. Top 10 pick last year in the draft, guys coming in. I mean, just landed a top lineman out of Harrisburg. So we would talk about, I mean, my brain goes straight to the talent acquisition piece of it, of like, what raw materials are we building with, and who's actually building. So I feel decent about the offensive line. Hopefully they can pick up, some of the slack from last year to run a basket and increase that production a little bit from those guys, and see what happens.
At tackle, Nolan Rucci, the transfer from Wisconsin, somebody who was recruited by Penn State years ago, is going to be a focal point. Javon Williams is somebody that people potentially expect to start at tackle, potentially at I want to say it was left tackle, if I'm not mistaken. Then Anthony Donko was somebody who got a lot of praise from the Peach Bowl into the offseason as somebody who could step in at right tackle altogether. Chimdi Ono is another guy who could potentially contribute at that position. So there's a lot of different names. It's just the tackle spot's going to be where there's the most competition. Guard, you feel pretty good about with Sal Wormley, Vega Ioane, JB Nelson, Cooper Cousins. You've got depth at guard, and you can rotate and platoon guys in there if you want, and it's not that big of a drop off. Center is the spot where it's like, okay, does Dawkins really clamp down on this thing? Running back, I don't think I need to tell anybody who Nick Singleton and Katron Allen are. I think that's pretty obvious. One question that I saw in the comment section for us on YouTube recently, I was curious if you had any information on this, is that you and I have talked about what Quentin Martin Jr. and Cam Wallace can be as supplementary backs in this offense, and we are interested to see how deep into the depth chart Andy Kotelnicki goes with the running backs, considering he wants to emphasize the running game, and you have a lot of different style of players there. One player that I saw a question was Corey Smith, and is just an absolute speed demon, somebody that a lot of people are looking at. Is he going to be somebody that's featured in 2024? I don't know, but I figured I'd ask you if that was somebody that you might have some information on.
Not sure, but I did hear him making a splash in the spring. He was one of the guys that I think that we talked about when we were going through our spring breakdowns of like the smaller running back that was just making a whole bunch of big plays. And when you talk about explosive plays, being able to run through the tackle and take off, right? So you think of someone that I'm going to say combining Nick Singleton and Katron Allen's best attributes in a smaller package. But that's the that's the information that I was getting back, that he was like, oh, he can run between the tackles, kind of like Katron, and when he gets in the open field, he can really take off like Nick. But he's not 6'1", 225 like Nick, and he's not 5'11", 225 like Katron.
Like
so
5'10", 180. Which might be
yeah, but you know me, speed brings opportunity. I like speed, man. I just, as a defensive player, I wish offensive guys understood the game within the game. That's why I talk about coordinators like mentality. Because I mean, if you're just looking at the X's and O's of the players, and okay, if he can just execute this route or do that, like, but when there's that underlying just speed opportunity where you can get beat on anything, it really F's up a defense and like how they play on their heels. So as a defensive player, I just I don't like going. I don't like going against speed like that. It just brings another dynamic that you have to think about, where you're just always ready to trigger. But it's just always interesting when sometimes offensive coaches don't value it, because like the outcomes or just reading the stats of different production makes them feel comfortable. Like, hey, I don't need this guy that's like that. I can deal with this guy that can just do these routes that I need him to do and execute, so their reads are clean. But damn, dude, there is something about a guy that can score on any play that you have to just be on point to where it makes those simple plays that much easier to execute.
Because it's the word you use, simple, is perfect. It's, you don't have to coach it. There's not a whole lot that has to go into it. And what did Johnny Dixon say with us last year? It's like, when you're better than people, you just play. And when you're the fastest guy on the field and you're the best athlete on the field, everything's a lot easier that way. It's a lot easier for you as an individual, but it's a lot easier for the rest of your position, your side of the ball, period.
No, 1000%. It's funny because like once you understand certain things of the game, you can find little cadences, right? I remember growing up, it was just like playing basketball. It was like an in and out move. One of my friends' dad showed me an in and out move. It's like, all right, you set somebody up. It was like essentially learning the angles, right? Of a, and so I went up an in and out and then crossover, in and out and then crossover, using speed to beat them and like setting up angles. Long story short, I made that connection to like in high school, or just even the development piece of like playing a zone running back. Everything is that same thing. It's press, cut back, press, cut back. And just understanding when you have a certain special skill, you don't have to do a whole bunch of stuff, right? Like, I don't got to shake this guy, do this. It's like, no, we press, and we go. Like when you can do those different type of things, like you said, simple and efficient, whether it's me in development, whether it's me from an evaluation standpoint, the guys that can do the simple things at an explosive manner, those are the best guys to me, because it's repeatable in action, in the fire. Like if you can do those things at a high clip, and I think when offensive coordinators find that nice balance of talent and keeping things simple, you have success. I mean, I like to bring up Urban Meyer every time we played them. You watch the Florida teams, the Utah teams, like that playbook wasn't extensive. I mean, we played them and they came back. He was just running cross routes. Paris Campbell, and I'm talking, these dudes are flying. You know what I mean? Simple stuff. We're just, again, football's about angles and numbers, speed and length, out stretch angles and numbers or close those down. So like when you just get to the basics of it, you can really start building out some fun ways of executing football. So I'm saying all that to say is that, I mean, I think the offense, if they can keep it simple and just, you know, smoke, screen, mirrors a little bit of how we're getting into different things, and then playing when, say, Hut, 115 miles per hour, everybody's decisive, getting angles, getting edges, getting in space. That's a recipe for wins and excitement and fans to support, give money, pay for the new stadium, all that good stuff.
Get some new legislation. There's going to be
because I'm serious too about the speed and like the casual fan. When there's excitement going on in the game, they want to continue to pay to come and see what's happening. So I think it's beneficial all the way around.
I want to wrap up on quarterback. I think we all know what Drew Allar is potentially capable of. I'm curious to see if in August we learn more about this proverbial Bo Perbula package that we've talked about now for years of, is he going to get in there? Is it going to be like Trace all over again? Something like that. Will that happen within Andy Kotelnicki's system? I think a lot of people are curious because of his time at Kansas, had 2 mobile quarterbacks, was using a 2 quarterback system there for a while. So people have looked at it and be like, man, Bo Perbula really fits what he was doing at Kansas, but it doesn't necessarily mean what Kotelnicki did at Kansas is going to be repeated at Penn State. I think that's a question mark. And then also there's been some footage on social media and a lot of buzz about Ethan Grunkemeyer, a freshman quarterback who is potentially 3rd or 4th string, depending on how the camp battle goes. I don't think you're going to necessarily see him against West Virginia. I hope to continue to hear positive things throughout August, but Bowling Green and Kent State in the middle of September, if you're going to see him and get a glimpse of him, that's probably going to be the opportunity to get it. I'd be shocked if he beat out Bo Perbula. However, that would be quite the coup if that happened. I don't expect it, but still there's that position battle to look at deeper on the quarterback depth chart.
I will say I've been talking to some of my evaluator friends. I'm not going to throw any names out. And we've been talking about Drew Allar a lot. And they were trying to say that, I mean, I guess the Penn State ecosystem might be too close to the Drew Allar situation. That's where my expectations came from, even like that comment earlier. Because just speaking to a lot of evaluators, like they isolate the film, not understanding the context of in-game and watching while they're moving, but just watching a cut up of his first year playing. He still displays like first round things quite often for guys that don't have the full context of like, hey, what did this game mean? This situation and all those different aspects. When you look at the tools, how he's playing, it was just echoed to me by multiple people that I respect. Where it's like, man, I think you guys are killing. I mean, I think that the fans are killing him too quick. Or I think the expectations are like he's pretty good. Like you only like this percentage, like that's hard to do. Like the things that he did accomplish last year is actually pretty impressive when you isolate like how he was doing the different things and his arm ability, his mobility in the pocket was better than what people expected. And just when you think of having everything line up the right way, I mean, look at my guy from Arizona State that went to LSU, winning situation.
Yeah, Jaden Daniels. Yeah,
Jaden Daniels wins the thing and goes, top 10. That's probably my biggest miss as a evaluator, but that's another story for another day.
Another podcast. We'll do
another podcast. But no, I'm just saying that just to the Penn State fans outside looking in, a lot of evaluators still very high on Drew Allar and what he's shown on film. Not necessarily just reading the clips, but all the good things when you're evaluating a quarterback. So keep that in mind.
Does he break out in 2024? We're going to find out. Get at us in the comments section on social media. Let us know who you're excited about, who you're worried about, what positions you're going to be paying attention to throughout Penn State's training camp on offense.
Thank you all so much for joining us. This episode and our entire library of shows is available now on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and wherever else you get your podcasts. Also, let us know what you think of the show on social media and check out all of our content on X, Instagram, and TikTok. Search for the handle @StateOfStatePod. State of State is presented by Bet Online and by Blue White Outfitters.